What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. This is the DCEU ranking, which means that this is gonna be the most divisive ranking ever because people really love a lot of DCEU movies. People hate a lot of DCEU movies. People prefer a different taste to DC as opposed to another one. And the DCEU was just all over the place when it came to that. Now, I'm not going to count Blue Beetle whenever that comes out in the DCEU ranking, as James Gunn says it's part of his DCU. So I'm going to consider that as its own entity that's a part of the DCU, and it's not a part of James Gunn's cinematic. Well, no, it is a part of James Gunn's cinematic universe, but it's not a part of this current iteration of the DCEU. But I will count Aquaman 2 when it comes out at the end of December. Who's waiting all the way till December for Aquaman? Maybe Aquaman 2 will surprise us all. Who knows? But I highly doubt it from what we heard at CinemaCon for this movie. And look, this franchise is the most convoluted comic book movie franchise probably ever. The amount of drama, there's more backstory to the drama behind these movies than the actual interconnectivity of these actual movies. And look, I don't really care if these movies are interconnected. I just want them to be good. And unfortunately, spoiler alert, most of these are just not great DC comic book movies. Now, before I do this ranking, I want to say I am not a DC hater. I love a lot of what DC has done. And if Warner Brothers and DC from the get-go was smart about how to handle the cinematic universe, they would have easily blown the MCU away. DC has better comic book material than Marvel, in my opinion. This isn't to say Marvel is bad, it's just that DC has greater stories and also has some of the greatest heroes in all of just fiction. And yet, Warner Brothers absolutely fumbled the ball when it comes to the DCEU. So Has the Flash is the finale of the DCEU, and I assume Aquaman 2 is kind of going to be the epilogue to the DCEU. Let's pour one out and let's rank all 14 DCEU movies. Now, the reason I say 14 as opposed to 13 is simple, because there's two drastic versions of the same movie. And sure, you have the extended cut of Suicide Squad and Batman vs. Superman, but those are just kind of additions to the original movie, while Justice League is two completely different versions of the same movie. Like, very different. Like, they're almost different movies. So I decided to kind of add both versions on the list, even though technically the Snyder Cut is not canon to the DCEU. That's what Warner Brothers says, and we're going to abide by Warner Brothers. The Snyder Cut is not canon to the DCEU, but what is even canon to the DCEU at this point? Without further ado, let's get into this ranking video, and the last place movie is Justice League. Oh, I'm sorry. Justice League, as this was directed by Joss Whedon. This is how you absolutely butcher an original movie. First of all, they took a 4-hour movie and turned it into a straight up just 2-hour movie. And listen, although Joss Whedon absolutely nailed the Avengers movies, even though he's a creep nowadays, Joss Whedon's style does not fit Zack Snyder's style. So when you have a direct sequel to the two Zack Snyder movies, whatever your opinion on those movies are, then you have Joss Whedon come in to kind of conclude that quote-unquote trilogy, then it's just kind of weird because it doesn't really connect. My main issues with this movie is that a lot of these characters are underdeveloped. You know, we have the Flash, who is the one that probably gets the most screen time. He's the newest member that gets the most screen time. Cyborg is absolutely butchered in this movie. And Aquaman, he's just Aquaman. He's just there to have a fun time. But obviously, the center is Batman and Wonder Woman in this movie. And I like Wonder Woman, but that's just because I liked her in her previous appearances. I don't think there's anything here where there's nothing in this movie where I was like, damn, that was a really good Wonder Woman moment. It was just like, oh, Wonder Woman is doing her Wonder Woman shenanigans. But by far, probably the biggest contrast from Batman versus Superman to Justice League in terms of Joss Whedon's version of Justice League is Batman. Batman is a completely different character, and honestly, this kind of shows throughout the franchise the flippity flop that they have with Ben Affleck's version of the character, because on one moment they want him to be the more lighthearted Batman that interacts with all these other heroes, like Batman kind of is in the comics. I mean, this isn't to say Batman's like lighthearted completely, but then you have him being this freaking gritty, gruesome brute that is just absolutely destroying people and mowing them down in Snyder's take. And it seems like they didn't know which version of Batman to go with. And that's what I'm going to call the indecisive Ben Affleck Batman factor. That they didn't know where to take his character, or that there wasn't a consistent vision with a lot of these characters. Superman, despite this being the worst cut, this shows the potential Henry Cavill could have had if he had played the more optimistic Superman, the more, comics accurate version of Superman, to be honest. Sure, he might say, oh, he's just a Boy Scout. This isn't to say Superman is just, always smiling or whatever. Superman does go through pain and emotions, but we're going to uncover all of that when we get to Man of Steel in this video. But yeah, this shows Henry Cavill being the more happier Superman. And even though this movie kind of is, actually, it doesn't kind of, it absolutely sucks. It is awful. It's like, especially when you compare it to the Snyder cut now, it's just by far the worst movie. It's so bad. It's one of the more awful movie adaptations on this list. There's DCEU bad, and then there's just Justice League. So yeah, this movie kind of sucks. And we don't even have to talk about Steppenwolf, because there is nothing to talk about Steppenwolf. He is just a nothing villain. All right. Coming in at number 13 is the Suicide Squad. Haha, got you. It's Suicide Squad 2016. And I remember when I was in middle school, everybody was excited for this movie. Like, everybody was just excited. I was excited for it also because, I don't know, the marketing was just so good for this movie. Warner Brothers absolutely nailed the marketing for Suicide Squad, because it turned this idea into something that had to be a must-see movie. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers absolutely butchered David Ayer's cut, and this isn't to say David Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad would have been the greatest Suicide Squad movie, because we know in comparison to what's going to be later on in this list, neither version would have compared, but it would have at least been better than this travesty of a mess. Suicide Squad is like a music video edited together by committee, because it actually is. Because the music company that did the first Suicide Squad trailer, Warner Brothers, wanted that to be the tone for Suicide Squad. And so it's very obvious they were trying to replicate their own incarnation of Guardians of the Galaxy. Kind of funny how, life worked out at the end in terms of their approach to Suicide Squad. I'm just saying. But yeah, Enchantress is just not an interesting villain. She is very boring. It comes to the end of the world thing. And sure, I think the Suicide Squad could absolutely deal with out-of-world threats. I don't think the Suicide Squad should be out here trying to save the whole world when their whole, deal is trying to be, this task force that, is underground and secret. But both Suicide Squad movies kind of go out there at that point. So I can't really just criticize this movie, since, the James Gunn's version also kind of does this. But at the same time, a lot of these characters are one note. They don't have a lot going on with them, for the exception of Deadshot and Harley Quinn, who are probably the most developed characters. Also, Katana just kind of shows up out of nowhere, and the freaking fire guy kind of sacrifices himself. Yeah, Suicide Squad was just a mess. But like I said, if there was 3 characters you could take out of it, it's Amanda Waller, Harley Quinn, and Deadshot as some of the better characters in this movie. And we have to talk about Jared Leto's Joker. Look, listen, we already have a better version of Joker after this. He has his own movies. Jared Leto's Joker sucks, and I'm glad he never came back. Okay, I'm just glad. Oh, wait, never mind. He kind of did. But at least Snyder did a better job with that version of Joker than David Ayer did, kind of. Yeah, I just did not like Jared Leto's take on the Joker. But I was about to say birds of a feather flock together, but this movie is only really connected to number 12 because of the main lead, and that's Harley Quinn. And yeah, number 12 is Birds of Prey. I know a lot of people love this movie. They think it's fun. I don't think it's that funny, to be honest. And, it's a comedy movie. And there's just two main things. Number one, this movie did not really need to be rated R, and I'm not one of those guys that are like, no, this can't be rated R. Think of the children. And I'm not one of these guys that are like, oh my god, R rating would amplify this movie, but this movie didn't really need to be rated R. And it did hurt itself at the box office for being rated R. This could have easily been a PG-13 movie. There's only like a few sequences where you're like, oh, that's why it's rated R. But, it's nothing too crazy. My main problem is that this is when DC didn't understand Harley Quinn. The Harley Quinn show understood Harley Quinn, her progression, her character. Harley Quinn is not the DC equivalent to Deadpool. And that was my main problem with this movie. They were trying so hard to make Harley Quinn like Deadpool, and that's just not Harley Quinn's character. That's not who she is. And they were just forcing it down. The action is okay in this movie. It's actually not that bad. But, man, let's talk about Cassandra Cain. And before you get at me, no, I'm not dick writing the Cassandra Cain, arguments. But you compare Cassandra Cain, who is one of the best Bat family members, one of the best martial artists, even better than Bruce Wayne. She's a very different character in the comics. And you compare her to this movie. Why is she even called Cassandra Cain in this movie? She could have just been named something completely different, and it would have been fine. I wouldn't have cared. But you decide to go out of your way to call this character Cassandra Cain, and then she's not even Cassandra Cain like she is in the comics. It's just absolutely butchered. It's as if they were to call Peter Parker, let's just say Marvel did a Spider-Man adaptation where they call him Peter Parker. They call that their version of Spider-Man Peter Parker, but he has none of the character traits that Peter Parker has at all. And that's kind of what they did with Cassandra Cain in this movie. And listen, I love Margot Robbie. Literally, she's beautiful. But at the same time, I love her as Harley Quinn. But for me, this is the one time where I was like, yeah, this version of Harley Quinn, I can't take her in the full-on main lead role. I could take her as a supporting character, but not in the main lead role. And I don't know why on earth they have to give Batgirl's super team to Harley Quinn. Gotham City Sirens was right there in front of you. It would have been such an easy slam dunk, but they absolutely kind of butchered that. But hey, that's the name of the game. When it comes to DC, am I right? All right, coming in at number 11 is Wonder Woman 1984. And there's just really nothing to say about this movie. This movie is boring. And a lot of the criticisms that people have brought up to this movie, I agree with. Obviously, the whole Steve Trevor possessing somebody else's body and Wonder Woman decides to have sex with him, even though they didn't consent with the guy that, that's his body. He wasn't even conscious about it, which puts a lot of red flags in the air about, man, if this was reversed, how would people feel about the situation? But on top of that, this is a sequel that absolutely butchers the first one. And I'm not even the biggest Wonder Woman 2017 fan. I mean, I thought that movie was fine. We're going to get to it later. But as a sequel, this just absolutely it didn't really work for me that well. They removed a lot of Wonder Woman's iconic weapons for some reason. It was just as if Patty Jenkins was like, let's just go a drastic different version to Wonder Woman instead of building on what people liked about Wonder Woman in the 2017 movie. That, yes, she is kind. She is nice to several people, but there is a part of her that if she has to, she will get absolutely ferocious if she needs to. And that's what I admire about Wonder Woman's character, that she's beautiful and elegant, but also a fierce warrior. And they just got rid of the fierce warrior thing completely. The plot of this movie has so much plot holes. I don't really want to get into it. The whole Maxwell Lord wishing whole plot does not work. There's so many holes in it. Like, how does he know this is gonna happen? How do you know this is gonna happen? Blah, blah, blah. And since this movie is actually canon to the DCEU, and we're looking at it from, I think this movie should never have been made in 1984. I think this movie would have benefited from being a Wonder Woman movie set in the present, because how on earth did Batman go in and look up so much stuff about Wonder Woman but couldn't find anything in 1984. And especially how the movie goes, the literal apocalypse happens. She's on TV. There's several sightings of her out in public, and yet Batman could not find any information on her in the 80s. And, like, what? That's ludicrous to me. That is insane. Patty Jenkins kind of showed that she was a little bit of a hack. I'm not gonna lie, because her treatment for Wonder Woman 3 almost sounded as bad as Wonder Woman 1984. It almost has me baffled on why on earth are you gonna kill Steve Trevor if you keep bringing him back into these movies. I understand Diana needs somebody to kind of work off of, but like, if you're not gonna stay committed to killing Steve Trevor, don't kill Steve Trevor then, you know? It just kind of ruins the whole sacrifice he does in the first Wonder Woman movie. Yeah, and let's not get into Cheetah, her whole character progression. I mean, it's interesting. I like the idea they were going for with Cheetah, but it just all kind of falls flat towards the end of the movie. And yes, let's give Maxwell Lord a pass for him literally causing the entire apocalypse to almost happen because he has a son, and we have to be nice with people that have kids instead of making him face the consequences of his actions. I understand the power was draining him, but I mean he still intentionally kind of did it. But yeah, Wonder Woman 1984 is not that great. All right, number 10 is gonna be the hottest take, maybe depends on how you feel about these movies, but number 10 is Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice. Both cuts, by the way. And listen, this isn't me. I'm not going to debate with a bunch of Snyder fans, and I'm not going to say, oh, yeah, this is awful, this is worse, but I'm just not the biggest fan of Zack Snyder's take on these characters. And I know that sounds crazy since I just praised the Snyder Cut earlier in this video, but I'm not the biggest fan of Zack Snyder's take on the characters. I don't think he understood Batman at all. And before people say, but Batman kills in the other movies, I'm not justifying Michael Keaton's Batman killing people as well. I thought that was also not that great. So don't come at me with all of that. And this isn't a shit on Ben Affleck's Batman, but yeah, the whole killing thing I didn't really care for. But he also has some of the best action sequences I've seen for a Batman, probably in any movie live action. But the main problem is that this is Batman versus Superman. This isn't Batman and Superman working it together to take it down Lex Luthor or something. I mean, they do at the end, but like the whole movie is just building up Batman versus Superman, and it just feels so out of character for both versions of these characters. It feels like they're not even the comics version at all. Snyder's take on Superman continues to be my least favorite take on Superman in live action. And I know, I mean, I like Henry Cavill. I think he's good at casting, but I think the writing for his character is just not that great, especially in this movie where he's a doomer and gloomer. I understand the gravity of the situation, that Superman feels like he can't save everybody or whatever. And listen, it's not wrong to have Superman get eternal conflict, but it's just the way they portray it. I mean, it's just, I didn't really care for a lot of it. And this movie is just a big mess. Trying to shove the death of Superman storyline, trying to set up Justice League, introducing Wonder Woman, Lex Luthor. Talk about a character that was absolutely butchered. What even is that adaptation? I don't even want to consider him as Lex Luthor. I think Ben Affleck nails Bruce Wayne. I love his Bruce Wayne throughout all these movies. His Batman, again, as I'm talking about the walkie Batman, you won't believe his Batman is the same Batman. This version of Batman is the same Batman from The Flash and Justice League, but he is. And so that's kind of conflicting in a way. Batman vs. Superman causes so much debate, and I'm not even trying to get into a debate. This is just my ranking. That I did not like Batman vs. Superman, and I don't really care for Zack Snyder's take or take on a lot of these characters, to be honest. So yeah, overall Batman vs. Superman. I understand it has its lovers, and you know what? I respect that. It's not for me. If that's what it is, it's just not for me. And on top of that, I just did not care for a lot of the characters, take. And plus, Batman vs. Superman has already been destroyed criticism-wise. Like, there's so many videos out there, so I'm not even going to get that deep into it. All right, number 9 is Black Adam. I know a lot of people are going to be like, you put Black Adam over Batman vs. Superman? I mean, the real problem with the Black Adam movie, it's just generic. That's just it. It's just such a generic comic book movie. The Rock was terribly miscast as Black Adam. I think The Rock 10 years ago, 10 years ago he was still bald. I think The Rock 20 years ago could have played Black Adam, but I don't think The Rock in 2022 could play Black Adam now. And I know they spent 15 years trying to get this movie off the ground, but it just didn't work. Like, where did those 15 years go? It's the most generic superhero movie. It's like if you had an AI generator and you threw in X-Men, you threw in The Avengers, you threw in any other comic book movie in the last decade, you put in an AI generator, and you'll have the Black Adam movie. Even the third act was extremely just boring with Savak, whatever his name is. Like, Savak has a villain. Do you even remember Savak? You probably don't even know who that is. It's the devil-looking guy at the end of the movie. Yeah, you probably don't even remember this. Black Adam is a movie that is not the worst thing in the world, but it's also not that good, and it is extremely generic and extremely boring. And even what brings this movie down is the post-credit scene syndrome, where you could tell this entire movie was just made for the post-credit scene, which is Superman, and it absolutely went nowhere. It was absolutely killed in a span of 2 weeks. So thank you, Black Adam, for absolutely butchering all of that. I don't even have intense hatred for this movie. It's just whatever. It's a meh movie. All right, coming in at number 8 is Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Basically, all the feelings I have for Black Adam, but with Shazam! Fury of the Gods, it is very generic. It's not a good comic book movie, that's for sure. I honestly debated if I was to put this over Black Adam, but no, not even put it over Black Adam. I was debating if I should put this under Black Adam, as a matter of fact. But there's a little bit of some charm with this movie. The leads, I feel like, are a little better. But my main problem is Zachary Levi's take on Shazam. He is easily just at the worst of his, of him being Shazam in this movie. And the overall main problem with this is that he's acting more like a kid than freaking Asher Angel, who is the kid in this movie. And the problem is that Asher Angel is a freaking teenager. Billy is 18 in this movie, and you're telling me that his version of Shazam is dumber than he was when he was just, 14 in the last movie? I call bullshit on that. And the main problem, well, Billy isn't exactly 18, but he's almost about to be 18 in the movie. And that's just what holds it down. And on top of that, we don't get that much Billy. So it's like everything that was good about the first Shazam movie was absolutely just taken away in Shazam! Fury of the Gods. What made it unique, heartwarming, a charming little side adventure, they were like, oh man, we gotta make this bigger scale comic book movie. This is everything wrong with a comic book movie sequel, by the way. Feel like you have to go bigger and louder instead of going more deeper and intimate with the characters. And that's what I felt like was the problem with Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Even the storyline with Billy and his foster mom, it's in the back. You won't even remember it. It's just, it pops up in the beginning, and there's a callback to it at the end, but it's not really the main focal point of this movie. And I know some people also really enjoy this movie, but this is way worse than the first one. This is significantly worse than the first one. I honestly was in shock that they made a sequel that was somehow way worse than the first movie, which was kind of sad, in my opinion. Sorry for the background noise, by the way, earlier in the video. If it got a little loud, people around the house, damn, one day I'll get those editing skills. But anyways, coming in at number 7 is the most recent DCEU movie, and that is The Flash. And the problem with the Flash movie is it's actually, I already did a review on this movie, but I'm going to keep it brief. This is a huge mess. This is the most overhyped garbage I have seen. Like, I don't understand why people were praising this as one of the best comic book movies of all time. It's not even one of the best DCEU movies of all time, so that automatically disqualifies it as one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. But the main problem with The Flash is I just don't like the main character of Barry Allen that much. I mean, there are some scenes where I do feel bad for him, But Barry's not to me that interesting of a. I mean, he's interesting. I don't know what it is. It's just I don't like Barry Allen. This version of Barry Allen. So to have two versions of Barry Allen and for it to be like this stupid. It's just very stupid, actually, just how the movie is. The visuals are at the worst the DCEU has ever been for any movie. If there's one compliment I could give to every single DCEU movie, for the exception of this one, is that all their visual effects look amazing. Even the really, really bad ones have great visual effects. Maybe minus Justice League, but at least Justice League looked better than this movie. This movie looks like a $220 million budgeted cartoon, and that's not even in a nice way of saying it. And also on top of that, you have Michael Keaton Batman, who I'm not even the biggest fan of. And overall, you just have a movie that's just not good. And I think it really comes down to if you like Barry Allen, but more importantly, if you like the comedy of this movie. Because a lot of people think it's the funniest DCEU movie, think it's one of the funniest comic movies. It's not that funny. It's to me, it wasn't that funny. In fact, I just was more annoyed at the jokes than I was laughing at it. I didn't find anything really funny in the movie at all. And so, The Flash to me was just painful to sit through, to be honest. And it's probably it is, out of this entire list, the most overhyped piece of trash out of all of them. Out of all of them, it's the most overhyped piece of trash I've seen. Number 6 is Aquaman, and a lot of people like this movie for being fun. I consider this as a Fast and Furious type of movie where it's so bad, but it's kind of enjoyable, and that's what it is with Aquaman. You just can't believe some of the visuals that you're seeing. Some of it looks amazing and beautiful. The story is a little basic, and overall, it's just a fun adventure similar to Indiana Jones in a way, but overall, Jason Momoa has Aquaman, has the lead. He does a great job. Just too bad there's Amber Turner in this movie. But you know what? I will have to say she did an okay job as Mera, I guess. You have Ocean Master, who is, kind of like Loki in terms of his motivations and whatever. And honestly, this movie is just dumb fun. It's just dumb fun. I think I was a little too harsh when I first saw this movie because I really didn't like it. But when I rewatched it, I was like, you know what, this is dumb fun. Unfortunately, that's probably never going to happen with the Flash movie. So don't even comment that. Don't even say, well, maybe that'll happen for you for Flash. That's not happening with the Flash movie. But number 5 is Man of Steel. Don't worry, we're going to get to the good movies. We're going to get through the good movies of the DCEU very soon. But Man of Steel is just, there's so much debate with this movie. I'm just going to say, I don't like Zack Snyder's take on Superman. I don't like his take on Superman and the Man of Steel. I don't think that's the route they should have took Superman in the first place. I think this take on Superman absolutely butchered the public's perception on Superman, because earlier people didn't think Superman was this boring character, but after Zack Snyder's take, everybody thought Superman's such a boring character, and I just hope that James Gunn is able to reverse the effects that this movie has had on Superman's perception, because Superman's actually a very interesting character. Yes, you could have a positive character that is that wants positivity in the world without having to be a freaking gloomer and like fucking depressed all the time. Superman does go through struggles, he absolutely does, but I feel like this movie was like, we can't have Superman be like how he is in the comics, so we're just gonna make him super dark and brooding. They were trying to put the Dark Knight vibe into Superman, and that just does not work for Superman. And we don't even have to talk about the third act and how many people Superman unironically killed. But at least the DCEU kind of references this catastrophe in Batman vs. Superman, The Flash. There's other events that do reference the Man of Steel attack. So at least they take it as an actual tragedy of what happened in that movie. But overall, yeah, I didn't really care for Man of Steel that much. All right, number 4 is Wonder Woman. And now we're getting into the movies that I actually kind of liked in the DCEU. I know. After 14 movies, there was 10 movies I did not really care for that much. I know. But number 4 is Wonder Woman. And this movie is actually just really solid. It's a really great movie. I don't think it's one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. I don't even think it's really one of the greatest DC movies of all time, but it is a very solid movie from start to finish. It's a good Wonder Woman origin story movie, and the characters are endearing. Steve Trevor continues to be a gem, but this is the best that Gal Gadot has been as Wonder Woman, because this movie hides a lot of Gal Gadot's weaknesses as an actress in this movie, because Patty Jenkins actually did a good job covering it up for it. I can't say that for other movies though. I don't think she covered up a lot of Wonder Woman's, not Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot's acting abilities that much. But the movie itself, the story's point A to point B. Sure, it's very similar to Captain America, I guess, but that still doesn't deter it from being a very solid movie. I've said solid way too many times, but obviously, you have the scene where Steve Trevor's telling her, you can say, I can save today, you can save tomorrow, all that other stuff. Ah, man, it's great. It's great. Until the third act, where you have you have the whole Ares final battle happening, and you have this entire third act fight with, Wonder Woman and Ares. And I understand that was a Warner Brothers decision. I think that absolutely kind of butchered the movie and the message it was going for. Again, sorry for the background noise. I have inconsiderate people here. But anyways, it kind of, what's the word? It deterred a little bit of the message that the first Wonder Woman movie was going for. But overall, the movie is still good. It's still enjoyable as is. All right, number 3. I can't wait for this one. Shazam! Woo! Let's go. The first Shazam movie is a goddamn good time. This is probably the most rewatchable DCEU movie out of this entire list. The reason I love Shazam is that it's so different. It's such a breath of fresh air. It's a more small-scale superhero movie, and it's like, what if a kid got superpowers? But on top of that, you have Billy Batson, the emotional stress he's going through, the emotional drama that's going on with him. And that's why I say Billy is more interesting when he's just Billy than he is as Shazam, because sure, Zachary Levi still acts like a kid, but it's more excusable in this movie since, he's not a veteran that's had his power for years at this point and is still acting like a goofball. This is a kid, I should say, that is just figuring out his powers, that just got his powers, and that is learning his powers. And what makes this just a fun movie is everybody on board is just doing the best of their abilities in this. The family is just so... I just love the family. I just love the family so much in this movie. They're very supportive about Billy. The whole scene where he actually sees his mother for once and he realizes, damn, she never wanted me, is actually it's a scene I never thought I would see in a Hollywood movie, because a lot of Hollywood movies is like, oh, you gotta find your mom who disappeared and you find her, and then, oh my god, it's like, oh man, I missed your mom, but nah, this was real. This was like, yeah, I abandoned you on purpose because I don't care about you, which was the most realist thing ever. And you truly felt like, damn, Billy's mom is a piece of shit. So when he goes back to his foster family and decides to be a hero, that's what really gets to me about this movie. This used to be my favorite DCEU movie. Man, this just has everything I want. This makes me feel happy when I see this movie. This makes me feel like, damn, this was just a damn good time. And unlike The Flash, this movie is actually hilarious. It's actually very funny. A lot of the jokes land for me in this movie. Obviously, the Santa Claus that is just continuously cursing, I thought was funny. And then a lot of just the subtle humor in this movie was just done super well. So overall, I thought Shazam is still a great movie. But there are 2 movies that are a little better than Shazam for me. And the number 2 is the Snyder Cut. And I know, after everything I've said about Zack Snyder, how I don't like his version of Superman, I don't think he understood the characters. I still absolutely 100% believe that. But you would be flabbergasted to find somebody that prefers the 2017 cut over the Snyder Cut, and that's just because the Snyder Cut is the better version of this movie, of this version of Justice League. I feel like all the characters are still at their A game here. Batman's progression into being more of this kinder superhero makes sense for the most part. I feel like everybody was just better in this movie. Flash was better. Flash has one of the best scenes in a comic book movie ever, which is when he goes back in time to reverse everything but just the music and everything. Also, the soundtrack. This is the best soundtrack for a DCEU movie, which again is very hard to do since, A, at least most of the DCEU movies have banging soundtracks, but this is easily the best one. This is the best one that is in the franchise probably ever. And on top of that, I feel like all the characters were gelling a little better, and they did a full 180 where Cyborg in the 2017 version is the most boring, bland character. Cyborg is the heart of the movie in this version. It just blows my mind. Now, I still do have some criticism for this movie. For one, I still don't like Superman in this movie. I know, I don't like Superman in this movie. I don't care for Snyder's take on this character. And I still didn't really care for Batman that much. But overall, the Snyder cut is still infinitely way better than the 2017 cut and 2017 cut, and shows the potential Snyder kind of had. But I'm not delusional. I think it's time to just accept that they're not bringing back the Snyderverse at this point. I mean, it's not that I was feeding for it, but it's like, damn, they finally got it. But it's too late. It's too late. Because number one is the Suicide Squad. There's a reason why James Gunn was picked to be the head of the DC universe, and there's a reason why he's going to direct Superman. Well, I mean, the Suicide Squad is not the type of movie to show on your resume to direct Superman, but James Gunn shows an understanding for a lot of these characters, turning D-list characters like Peacemaker and Polka Dot Man into some of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. Ratcatcher 2 and Deadshot scenes had me feeling emotional, and then the entire plot just worked beat for beat for beat. This is also just another fun movie that is the most rewatchable of the DCEU. There's also a lot of gruesome violence in this movie, so unlike Birds of Prey, this actually deserved its R rating. Sorry for the background noise again. Jesus Christ. I'm not redoing this video though. It's already long enough. But anyways, you have all these characters. You made me feel bad for Starro. Starro! James Gunn made Starro work in live action, which has me a little frustrated that they weren't able to crack the code on Starro in the first ever Justice League movie when he's the first ever Justice League villain, which is kind of crazy, to be honest. A lot of this movie just works, and it's just on fire. I feel like there's not a lot of criticisms I could give to this movie. I mean, even if I were to give criticisms, I would feel like I would be kind of nitpicking the movie, but just everything worked so well for me. Peacemaker's character especially, and then you see his progression in the TV show. I didn't add the TV show on this list, but the TV show would be number 2 if you were to ask if where it would be in the ranking. It would be number 2. But yeah, just overall, the soundtrack also, although it's not as good as the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, it's still a great soundtrack coming from James Gunn. And overall, the racism scene, man, I could just go on and on and on about how much I love this version of the Suicide Squad, but that's why it's number 1, and that's why it is my favorite DCEU movie. I know basically majority of you might disagree with this list, but what do you think of the DCEU? Where would you rank all the DCEU movies? What's your favorite DCEU movie? Do you think I'm a little harsh on the DCEU movies? Just let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.